One slap in a courtroom isn't supposed to change history. But this one, it echoed louder than the gavel. Because the second her cheek stung, she didn't just take the hit. She flipped the whole system on its head. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. The courtroom smelled of old wood and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow over everyone inside. Reporters lined the back rows, their cameras forbidden, but their pens ready to capture every flicker of drama. The gallery was packed. Neighbors, strangers, people hungry to watch a black woman named Tiffany Rowan be paraded as a criminal. She stood at the defense table, wrists bare but dignity chained by the way every cop in the room looked at her, smirking, satisfied like vultures circling. Detective Harris leaned against the rail in front, thick-necked, mean-eyed, chewing gum like the trial was a show he'd already won. Tiffany kept her chin high, her jaw set. She refused to give him the satisfaction of breaking. Judge Klein, heavy-set with a permanent sheen of sweat across his forehead, tapped his gavel once, his voice dripping with false authority. "Ms. Rowan, you will answer the charges brought against you. This is not your stage for theatrics." Tiffany's lips parted, calm but edged. "Charges? Or lies you've been paid to read out loud?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Klein's face flushed. Before he could bark, Harris moved. A blur. A hand. Slap. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. Tiffany's head jerked to the side, her cheek burning hot. A stunned silence swallowed the courtroom whole. For a moment, even the buzzing lights seemed to hold their breath. From the back row, a woman cried out, "Lord, have mercy!" Reporters froze mid-scribble, eyes wide. Harris leaned over, his mouth close to Tiffany's ear, his voice low and poisoned. "Know your place." The smirk that followed was his mistake. Tiffany straightened, slow, deliberate. Her eyes locked on his, steady as steel. She touched her cheek, then let her hand drop to her side. For a heartbeat, the room thought she'd shrink back into silence. Instead, she smiled. Not soft, not broken, but sharp, dangerous, the kind of smile that warned of storms. "You want me quiet?" she said, her voice slicing through the thick air. "Then you should have hit me harder." The crowd gasped again. Even the stenographer stopped typing. Klein banged the gavel. "Order. Order in my court." His voice cracked, revealing the fear underneath. But Tiffany was already moving. Her heels clicked against the tile as she walked past Harris, past the stunned bailiff frozen mid-step, and mounted the stairs to the bench. Her movements weren't rushed. They were deliberate, like she was claiming something that had always been hers. The judge shot to his feet. "Ms. Rowan, you sit back down this instant." She didn't even glance at him. Her eyes fell on the desk, on a folder lying just slightly ajar, pages spilling out like secrets begging to be heard. Tiffany snatched it up, flipping through sheets of numbers, signatures, wire transfers, proof of corruption so brazen it made her laugh. The laugh wasn't hysterical. It was triumphant. She raised the folder high. "You call this a court of justice?" Her voice thundered, raw and commanding. "This is a marketplace, and I just found the receipts." Reporters scrambled to their feet, scribbling furiously. Murmurs turned to shouts. Harris lunged forward, but Tiffany slammed the gavel down with a force that rattled the wood. Bang! The sound silenced the chaos for a heartbeat. Tiffany's voice filled the room. "Court is now in session. But today, it isn't me on trial. It's you." Her eyes swept across Harris, the judge, the row of officers shifting uneasily in their seats. For the first time, they looked unsettled. For the first time, the power shifted. "Detective Harris," she spat his name like poison. "You think beating a woman in public makes you strong? It makes you guilty." Judge Klein, "You think your robe hides the blood money on your hands? It makes you exposed. Every name in this folder, dirty. Every one of you bought." The gallery erupted. Some shouted her name. Others just screamed in disbelief. Reporters pushed forward, hungry for every word. Harris charged, but Tiffany slammed the gavel again. Bang! Bang! "Sit down," she ordered. Because I'm not leaving this chair until the world hears the truth. Judge Klein's voice cracked in desperation. Bailiff, restrain her. Now. But the bailiff hesitated, eyes darting between Tiffany's fire and the roaring crowd behind him. The room was no longer Klein's. It belonged to her. Tiffany leaned back in the judge's chair, folders spread open before her, the gavel still warm in her grip. Her cheeks still throbbed from the slap, but now it burned with purpose, not shame. She looked straight into the sea of eyes, press, public, enemies, and allies alike, and declared, "You thought you were trying me. But today, history will remember I tried you." The courtroom detonated into chaos. Reporters screamed questions, spectators shouted, and cops scrambled. But Tiffany didn't move. She had the chair. She had the gavel. And for the first time, she had the power. By the next morning, Tiffany's face was everywhere. Clips of her seizing the judge's seat and slamming the gavel had gone viral within hours. Cell phone footage from the courtroom, grainy, shaky, but electric, played on every local news channel and spread like wildfire online. A headline on one screen blared. "The rogue judge, Tiffany Rowan, turns court upside down." Another countered, "Criminal or crusader? Woman hijacks court in shocking display." In barbershops and diners, in buses and boardrooms, people argued. Some called her insane, reckless, a threat to law and order. Others called her a hero, finally brave enough to expose what everyone whispered but no one proved. Tiffany sat in her small apartment, blinds drawn, her laptop open, the glow of screens bouncing off her tired face. She hadn't slept. Every channel, every blog, every trending hashtag had her name stamped across it. She scrolled through comments. "Queen Tiffany, give her the robe. Lock her up. She's dangerous. This is history in the making." She closed the laptop, exhaling. The noise outside was deafening, but inside her room, the silence pressed harder. On the kitchen table lay the folder she'd snatched from Judge Klein's bench. The papers inside were no longer just symbols of defiance. They were dynamite. Tiffany pulled them out one by one, spreading them across the table. Names she recognized leapt off the pages. Local council members, police captains, even a senator. Wire transfers, shell companies funneling money into luxury condos and private jets. Her chest tightened. "This isn't just a dirty judge," she whispered to herself. "This is a whole empire." She snapped photos of the documents with her phone, zooming in on signatures, dates, amounts. Millions of dollars moved like water, flowing between the same names that had controlled her city for years. A knock at her door jolted her upright. "Who is it?" she called, voice tense. "It's me, Caleb." Relief washed over her. She opened the door for her younger brother, who slipped inside quickly, locking it behind him. Caleb worked in city records, quiet and bookish, the opposite of Tiffany's fiery nature. But his eyes were wide now, fear sharp in them. "You've started something you can't stop," he said, almost in a whisper. Tiffany folded her arms. "They slapped me in front of the world, Caleb. I wasn't about to bow and crawl away. I'm not talking about the slap." He pointed to the papers scattered across her table. "These names, if half of this is true, you've got a bomb in your hands. And they will come for you before they let this see daylight." Tiffany held his gaze steady, then let them come. "I'm done being scared." Caleb ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand. This isn't just Harris or Klein. This goes all the way up. Business moguls, politicians, these are the people who own the city." Tiffany tapped the folder with her finger. "And now I own them." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Caleb shook his head, torn between admiration and terror. "Promise me you'll be careful," he said finally. Tiffany smirked, though her heart thudded. Careful never changed the world. That night, she sat on her couch, the television flickering in the dark. A news anchor's voice carried through the room. Public opinion remains divided as Tiffany Rowan, dubbed the rogue judge, continues to trend nationwide. Authorities have not yet announced formal charges, but sources confirm an internal investigation into Judge Klein and Detective Harris is underway. Tiffany leaned back, a smile tugging at her lips. The city was finally watching. The walls that had felt unbreakable were starting to crack. But then the anchor's tone shifted. Sources also say Rowan herself may soon face arrest for contempt of court, obstruction of justice, and theft of judicial records. Her smile faded. She wasn't naive. She knew they tried to spin it back on her. But with the folder in her possession, she had more leverage than they realized. She reached for the gavel. She'd somehow walked out of the courthouse with its weight solid in her hand. She ran her thumb across the wood, remembering the sound it made when she slammed it down. Bang! The city had woken up. Bang! The corrupt were rattled. Bang! And Tiffany Rowan had just declared war. The knock didn't come this time. It was the crash of her front door splitting off its hinges. Tiffany bolted upright from the couch, heart slamming against her ribs. Heavy boots stormed in, flashlights sweeping through the dark apartment. Shadows of broad shoulders filled the hallway. Police! A voice barked, though there was nothing legal about the way they moved. Tiffany lunged for the folder on her table, clutching it to her chest. She darted into the bedroom, the papers digging into her arms as she shoved the window open. Cold night air slapped her face. Behind her, drawers were ripped open, furniture smashed. She heard Harris's voice, calm, cruel, unmistakable. Find it. Every page. Leave nothing behind. Her stomach twisted. They weren't looking for her. They were hunting the evidence. She squeezed through the window, feet scraping against the fire escape ladder, just as a flashlight beam sliced into her room. There! She's moving! Adrenaline carried her down the metal rungs 2 at a time. Shouts followed, boots pounding closer. Tiffany clutched the folder tight as if it were her last breath. By the time she hit the alley, headlights cut the darkness. 2 black SUVs boxed her in. Her pulse spiked. She spun, looking for escape, and that's when a hand yanked her into the shadows. Tiff! It was Caleb. His face pale, his grip trembling. Come on, this way. They sprinted down the alley, weaving through trash bins and broken glass. Harris's voice thundered behind them. Don't let her get away. Caleb shoved open a back door to an old laundromat. The air inside reeked of bleach and rust, but it was dark empty. They ducked behind a row of machines, breath ragged. Tiffany pressed her back to the cold metal, clutching the folder against her chest. Caleb grabbed her shoulders. His voice cracked with urgency. You don't get it, Tiff. This isn't just Harris and Klein. This network, it's bigger. Way bigger. I've seen fragments in city records. Land deals, fake companies, contracts. This money touches everything. Tiffany blinked at him, sweat dripping down her brow. How big? He swallowed hard. The police, city hall, even state senators. They're laundering millions through construction projects, fake charities, and it's not just local. Out-of-state accounts, offshore banks. Her mind reeled. Every page of the folder suddenly felt heavier in her arms. This wasn't just corruption, it was an empire. And now they know you've got proof, Caleb whispered. They won't stop until you're gone. A crash sounded outside, the SUVs circling. Harris's voice again, closer this time. Check the back. Tiffany grabbed Caleb's hand. Her voice was low but fierce. Then we don't run. We fight. Caleb's eyes widened. Fight them? Tiff, they own the city. She gripped the gavel she'd taken from the courtroom, pulling it from her bag. The wood was smooth under her fingers, almost symbolic now. Then I'll take the city back, piece by piece. Caleb shook his head, torn between terror and awe. Footsteps echoed at the laundromat's front door. Harris's men were close. Tiffany shoved the folder into Caleb's arms. Hide this. If they catch me, at least the truth survives. But Caleb clutched it tighter and pushed it back. No, we do this together. The door burst open. Flashlights cut through the darkness, beams sweeping across the broken machines. Tiffany's chest heaved as the footsteps drew nearer. She could hear Harris's breathing, deliberate, confident. Come out, Tiffany, he called, voice echoing. This ends tonight. Her pulse thundered. Caleb's hand trembled in hers. She closed her eyes for a second, just 1 second, and saw the courtroom again. The slap, the sting, the way the world gasped when she stood up. She opened her eyes, fire burning through her veins. No, she whispered. This begins tonight. Gripping Caleb's hand, she bolted through a side door just as Harris's flashlight swept past. Bullets shattered glass behind them. They didn't look back. They disappeared into the night, running with nothing but the folder, the gavel, and a vow forged in fear and fury. Tiffany's vow wasn't survival anymore. It was war. The city was already a boiling pot, but when Tiffany leaked the first set of documents, it was as though someone had ripped the lid clean off. Within hours, the papers were splashed across every channel, blog, and news feed. Hush money transfers, coded transactions, and signatures that pointed to the very cops and judges people were supposed to trust. Protesters flooded the courthouse steps with handmade signs, their chants echoing like war drums. No justice, no peace, and jail the corrupt. Tiffany watched from the safety of an old diner booth, the hood of her sweatshirt pulled low, a laptop open in front of her. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Every click she made was another jab into the ribs of the empire that had nearly destroyed her. On the television above the counter, the anchorman's voice carried weight. Sources suggest this corruption scandal ties directly to senior police officers and possibly Judge Klein himself. No official statements have been made. The waitress, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, shook her head as she topped off Tiffany's coffee. City's never seen anything like this. Whoever dropped those files, God bless him, took guts. Tiffany gave a tight smile, saying nothing. But inside, her chest swelled with both fear and pride. She knew the real storm was only beginning. In a dimly lit office downtown, Harris paced like a caged animal. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt, and his jaw clenched as he jabbed a finger at Judge Klein, who sat stiffly behind his mahogany desk. "This is your mess, Klein." Harris spat. "You said the girl would fold in court. Instead, she's making us look like fools in front of the whole damn city." Klein's face twitched, his composure cracking. "Don't you dare pin this on me. You're the one who lost control of her. One slap. Harris. That's all it took to make her a martyr." Harris leaned over the desk, eyes like steel. "We fix this now, or we both go down." The judge's hands fidgeted with a glass of bourbon, his knuckles white. "She has files that could bury half the council. If she keeps leaking," he trailed off, his face pale. Harris's voice dropped, low and lethal. "Then she doesn't keep leaking." Unbeknownst to them, Tiffany crouched in the shadows of the janitor's closet across the hall, a recording device hidden in her sleeve. She had slipped into the building disguised as a delivery girl, her baseball cap pulled low. Every word spilling from their lips was like striking oil, pure proof of the rot she'd been shouting about. Click! She saved the file, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Later that night, the city seemed to hold its breath. Tiffany moved quickly through the deserted parking garage, the neon flicker of a broken light above her. The recording device was snug in her pocket. This was the kind of evidence that didn't just shake headlines, it toppled kings. She was almost at her car when a voice cut through the silence. Well, look who thinks she's clever." Tiffany froze. Detective Harris stepped from the shadows, gun drawn, the cold steel catching the dim light. His eyes burned with something between rage and desperation. "You really think you're some kind of hero?" His voice was venom, his footsteps echoing as he advanced. "All you've done is put a target on your back, and your brothers." The mention of Caleb made her blood run cold, but Tiffany straightened her shoulders. She wouldn't let him smell her fear. "You hit me in that courtroom," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor inside. "You try to silence me, and now the whole city knows what you are." Harris sneered, circling her like a predator. "The city forgets. The city moves on. But you don't get to move on." The gun rose level with her chest. For a heartbeat, everything was still, the kind of stillness that crackled before lightning struck. Tiffany's mind raced, every nerve on fire. The protests, the files, the people chanting outside the courthouse. They were all counting on her not to break here, not to die in the dark at the hands of a desperate cop. And Tiffany, staring into the barrel of his gun, knew one thing. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the blood in the water. The gun glinted inches from her chest, but Tiffany's eyes didn't flinch. Behind her calm stare, her fingers inched toward the small device in her pocket, the same recorder she'd used inside Judge Klein's office. Only this time, it wasn't just recording. It was transmitting. She had dialed a secure line to Maya, an old college friend turned investigative reporter. From a second Harris's voice cut through the garage, Maya had been listening. Now, every venom-laced word he spewed was traveling live into her newsroom headset. "You don't get it, do you?" Harris hissed, his gun unwavering. "You're a speck of dust in a storm. People like me, we are the storm." Tiffany's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Funny thing about storms," she murmured, sliding her hand fully into her pocket. "They make a lot of noise when they break." Before Harris could react, she clicked the side of the device. A green light blinked, confirming what he didn't yet know. His voice was already live, carried over the airwaves to Maya, who was feeding it to the station. Maya's voice came softly through the tiny speaker in Tiffany's earbud. "We're rolling. Keep 'em talking." Tiffany's heart drummed, but her voice rang steady, slicing through the tense silence of the garage. "Tell me, Harris, how many lives have you ruined to protect your little empire? How many innocent people have you framed?" His nostrils flared, his grip tightening on the gun. "Don't play games with me, Tiffany. I could end this right now." "Then do it," she said, tilting her chin up. "But the whole city will hear you pull the trigger." For the first time, doubt flickered in Harris's eyes. He lowered the gun a fraction, scanning her, then the shadows around them, like he could feel the invisible audience pressing in. "What did you do?" His voice cracked, the calm cracking under pressure. "I gave you the mic," Tiffany said, her voice cold steel. "And the world is listening." At that exact moment, phones across the city buzzed with breaking alerts. On the news, Harris's threats streamed raw and unfiltered, every syllable broadcast to thousands. Protesters outside the courthouse erupted with a new chant. "We heard you. We heard you." Harris's face drained of color. He took a stumbling step back, realization dawning like a death sentence. "No." His whisper was more like a plea. "No, you didn't." "Oh, but I did." Tiffany cut in, her words sharp enough to draw blood. For a moment, it felt like victory. Tiffany had exposed him, stripped him bare before the city he once controlled. But then the victory twisted. Her phone buzzed in her other pocket. Unknown number. She answered cautiously, keeping one eye on Harris, whose hand was still trembling near the trigger. The voice on the other end made her blood run cold. "We have Caleb." She froze. Her brother's name sliced through her like a blade. Caleb, her anchor, the one person who never doubted her. "If you want to see him alive," the voice continued, calm, calculated, "you'll bring us every shred of evidence. No leaks, no games. Just you, the files, and a deal. Otherwise, the line went dead." Tiffany stood there, rooted, the gun still aimed at her, but suddenly meaningless compared to the weight of those words. "Caleb, taken." Harris smirked, seeing the shift in her eyes. "Looks like your little crusade just got personal." The rage burned hot in Tiffany's chest, but beneath it, fear gnawed at her ribs. For the first time, she wasn't just fighting for justice. She was fighting for blood, for family. Her mind spun, surrender the evidence, and the empire survived. Refuse, and Caleb's life hung by a thread. She forced herself to breathe, even as her hands shook. "If they touch him," she whispered, more to herself than Harris, "I'll burn every last one of them to the ground." The detective tilted his head, sneering. "Be careful, Tiffany. Fires don't always burn the people you want them to." The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, standing victorious in front of a crumbling monster, and yet she'd never felt more cornered. It was a trial by fire, and Tiffany knew there would be no easy verdict. The city was hers to win or lose. And now, so was her brother's life. The night Tiffany walked into that abandoned hotel ballroom, the city seemed to hold its breath. Rain slicked the cracked pavement outside, neon signs blinking like nervous eyes. She carried no bag, no files, nothing but the weight of the bargain she'd made, herself for Caleb. Two armed men in suits flanked the door, silent as statues. They searched her, rough hands patting her down, before pushing her into the cavernous room. The smell of cigar smoke and old money hung thick in the air. And there, at the center of a long table draped in black cloth, sat Stanton. Victor Stanton, the billionaire developer whose name was etched across half the skyline. The man who smiled for ribbon cuttings while quietly stripping neighborhoods to their bones. He leaned back in his chair like a king surveying his kingdom, cufflinks gleaming under the chandelier's golden light. Judge Klein sat stiffly on one side, Harris on the other, both suddenly small in Stanton's shadow. "Well," Stanton drawled, voice smooth as poison, "the woman of the hour. The so-called rogue judge." He gestured lazily to the guards. "Bring in her incentive." The doors opened again. Caleb stumbled forward, wrists bound, face bruised but defiant. His eyes found Tiffany instantly, widening with relief and warning all at once. "Tiff, don't," he started, but Harris shoved him down into a chair with a grunt. Tiffany's heart clenched, but she kept her face steady, her voice calm. "You've got me. Let him go." Stanton's smile spread, thin and amused. "Oh, you misunderstand. This isn't a negotiation. This is an education. You thought Klein and Harris were your villains." He chuckled, shaking his head. "They're pawns. I am the board. Every protest, every headline, you've been dancing in my theater." Tiffany's jaw tightened. "And you've been buying land with dirty money while framing innocence to keep the city distracted." The billionaire arched a brow, impressed she'd pieced it together. "Sharp girl. But sharp doesn't keep you alive." He leaned forward, eyes glinting. "The files. All of them." Now, the room went silent. Every eye on her. Caleb breathing hard through his gag. Harris smirking like he'd already won. And Tiffany slowly lifted her hands in surrender. "Fine," she said. "You win." She reached inside her coat pocket, pulling out a sleek black phone. She placed it gently on the table, sliding it towards Stanton. He picked it up with a predator's grin. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" But Tiffany's lips curved into something dangerous. "No, not hard at all. Especially when the whole city is watching." Stanton frowned. "What?" Then the chandelier above hummed, almost like it was alive. Tiny red dots blinked to life in the corners of the room. Micro cameras, hidden, active, streaming. On screens across the city, people's feeds lit up with a new notification. Live, inside the Devil's Den. And there, in crystal clear video, the faces of Stanton, Judge Klein, and Detective Harris stared out like deer caught in headlights. Their voices spilled raw and unfiltered. The threats, the confessions, the schemes, all captured. Stanton shot up from his chair, slamming the phone on the table. "You bit." Tiffany cut him off, her voice loud and ringing with purpose. "No, Stanton, this isn't my trial anymore. It's yours." Klein scrambled to his feet, sweat pouring down his face. "Shut it down. Shut it down now." But it was too late. Outside, in bars, living rooms, and on courthouse steps, citizens watched the empire rot from the inside. The corruption they'd whispered about was no longer rumor. It was reality, broadcast in high definition. Caleb's muffled cry broke through the chaos, and Tiffany rushed to him, ripping the gag free. He coughed, eyes wet with relief. "You crazy genius," he rasped. She cut his ties, helping him stand, while Stanton bellowed orders at his men. But the guards hesitated, uncertain now that the entire city saw them as criminals, not enforcers. For the first time, power shifted. Tiffany stood tall, fire in her eyes. "The people aren't afraid of you anymore. You should be afraid of them." The ballroom erupted, shouts scrambling, the billionaire's mask finally cracking. And outside, the city roared, a tide too powerful to silence. The devil's bargain had been flipped on its head. Tiffany hadn't just survived the trap. She had turned it into the biggest trial the city had ever seen, one the guilty could never escape. The city erupted like a volcano. By dawn, the live stream from Stanton's ballroom had spread to every corner. On cracked phones and subway cars, televisions in crowded diners, and glowing billboards that replayed Harris and Klein's damning words on a loop. The people had their proof, and proof was gasoline. At first, the protests swelled with chants, waves of bodies pouring into the streets. But when police tried to push them back, the chants turned into roars, the roars into rage. Bottles shattered against riot shields. Smoke plumed into the night sky. By the second day, entire avenues burned, flames licking the walls of stand-known buildings. On one corner, graffiti scrawled in red spray paint read, "Rogue judge was right." Harris was nowhere to be found. The man who once strutted the courthouse halls now hid like a rat in the underbelly of the city. Word spread that he was on the run, chased not only by the people he brutalized, but by his own allies, desperate to silence him before he flipped. Tiffany heard whispers. Harris spotted at a bus station. Harris hiding in a motel. Every rumor added to his legend, but also his doom. In the eyes of the public, he wasn't just a cop anymore. He was the embodiment of betrayal. And betrayal had no safe haven. Judge Klein didn't fare better. His resignation came in a shaky televised address, his voice cracking as he tried to salvage dignity. But the image of him sitting beside Stanton during the live stream, nodding, complicit, couldn't be erased. His career was over, his name stained beyond repair. Effective immediately, he said, removing his glasses with trembling hands, I resigned from my post. The city didn't care. To them, his resignation was an afterthought, a desperate man jumping from a sinking ship. But Stanton's empire wasn't crumbling as easily. Yes, his face had been exposed, his voice recorded. Yet billionaires like him didn't vanish overnight. He still had lawyers, media allies, politicians in his pocket. While streets burned, he appeared on select news networks, painting Tiffany as an unstable criminal who had staged a spectacle for fame. She's no hero, Stanton's polished voice declared on live TV. She endangered this city with lies and theatrics. And now look, riots, chaos. This is on her hands. The spin was working on some. Tiffany's name began to fracture into two extremes. Hero, criminal, liberator, terrorist. Her face appeared on posters across the city, spray-painted halos above her head in some neighborhoods, devil horns in others. Kids on street corners wore masks of her face, shouting her slogans. Meanwhile, Stanton's channels plastered, wanted warnings, urging her capture. Tiffany had become something she never asked to be, both a fugitive and a folk hero. She and Caleb moved like shadows, hopping safe houses, leaning on strangers who believed in her cause. Each night, Tiffany lay awake, staring at ceilings that weren't hers, the weight pressing heavier on her chest. You lit the match, Caleb whispered one night as they lay on thin mattresses in a basement. His tone wasn't blame, it was awe, and the whole city caught fire. Tiffany turned to him, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. And what if I can't put out? What if I just made everything worse? Caleb reached for her hand, his grip firm. You showed people the truth. That's never worse. That's the start. But his reassurance didn't ease the storm inside her. Every scream in the streets, every news anchor debating her name. It all circled back to one question. Had she unleashed justice or chaos? One evening, as she slipped through an alley plastered with her own face, she overheard two teenagers arguing. She's a hero, man. She stood up when nobody else could. No, she's reckless. People are dying out here cause of her. My uncle's shop got burned down. Tiffany froze in the shadows, their words stabbing deeper than any bullet could. To some, she was salvation. To others, she was the spark of destruction. She walked on, her hood pulled low, her heart heavy. By the week's end, the city looked like a battlefield. Cars overturned, sirens endless, Stanton's empire fighting tooth and nail to survive. And through it all, one chant echoed the loudest, bouncing off cracked pavement and broken windows. Tiffany, Tiffany, Tiffany. She wasn't just Tiffany anymore. She was a symbol, a war cry, a storm. But as she stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror, her face both idolized and hunted, she whispered the truth only she could admit. I never wanted this. And yet, the city was aflame, and she was its reluctant fire starter. The courthouse stood like a scar against the city skyline, its windows cracked, its steps littered with graffiti, its halls long abandoned. Once, it had been Stanton's fortress of power, where verdicts were bought and justice was strangled. Now, it was just another hollow building in a city still smoldering from weeks of protests and riots. Tiffany walked up those marble steps alone. No cameras, no chance, no angry mob following behind her this time. Just her, hood up, hands trembling slightly, a backpack slung over her shoulder. The silence was louder than any crowd. Every step echoed, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting. She pushed the heavy doors open. They groaned like something ancient waking from a long sleep. Dust danced in the fractured light that leaked through shattered windows. The air smelled of mildew and ashes. For a moment, she stood still in the vast lobby, staring up at the carved ceilings that once screamed authority. Her footsteps carried her deeper, past overturned chairs and broken glass, until she reached the courtroom, the same one where she had once pretended to wear the robe, holding a gavel like a stolen crown. But today there was no disguise, no lies, just Tiffany and the echoes of everything she had set in motion. She climbed the steps to the judge's bench. Slowly, reverently, each step felt heavier, as if the wood itself carried the weight of centuries of corruption and control. Finally, she reached the chair where men like Judge Klein had sold justice to the highest bidder. She didn't hesitate. Tiffany lowered herself into the seat, her palms brushing against the worn armrests. A strange stillness washed over her. She wasn't here as a thief. She wasn't here as a fugitive. She was here as a woman who had cracked open the system and forced the world to look inside. For a long moment, she sat in silence, staring at the empty courtroom. Rows of benches once filled with frightened defendants, arrogant lawyers, corrupt cops, all gone now. In their place, only shadows and memory. And then Tiffany spoke, not to the room, not to herself, but to the city, maybe even the world. Her voice was steady, carried by a strength she hadn't known she had when all this began. They wanted silence, she whispered. They wanted obedience. They wanted me invisible. But they gave me a gavel. Her hand reached out and touched the wooden mallet lying on the desk. It was cracked, chipped at the edges, but still intact. The symbol of justice, stained, yet unbroken. She lifted it slowly, almost tenderly. Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with fire. Now the whole world's listening. The words hung in the air like a spell. For a moment, Tiffany imagined the voices of the people outside these walls. The ones who had chanted her name, spray-painted her face on buildings, turned her into something larger than life. She wasn't just Tiffany anymore. She was a movement, a reckoning, a reminder that even one stolen moment could shake the foundation of power. She slammed the gavel down. Crack! The sound exploded through the chamber, rattling the empty seats, echoing down the hallways like thunder. The city outside seemed to hold still. It wasn't just wood hitting wood. It was a declaration, a closing argument, a promise. In that instant, Tiffany wasn't a fugitive, a folk hero, or a thief. She was the judge the city had been waiting for. Her face hardened, then softened. A small, almost invisible smile tugged at her lips. Not joy, not triumph, but peace, the kind that comes when you finally accept the storm you've unleashed. She leaned back in the chair, letting the silence return. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Somewhere, people were still marching, still fighting, still demanding. But Tiffany knew her role had changed. She had sparked the fire. It was no longer hers to control. Her voice, lingering like the last echo of a sermon. They wanted silence. They gave me a gavel. Now the whole world's listening. And then, crack, the gavel fell one final time.